So, sorry for the tiny delay. We still had to grapple with a few technical issues. I'm not sure how many of you have been following this, but yeah, I guess this is what happens to all of us with these video conferences. So welcome to our online event, our online panel discussion at Reporters Without Borders Germany. And welcome especially to Gabor Poljak and Karolina Zbigniewska. And I'm really glad to have you here to discuss, I think, an important issue. And welcome to everybody following us. Before we dive into our topic, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself because I keep forgetting that. So my name is Christoph Dreyer. I work with Reporters Without Borders Germany here in Berlin. And yeah, if there's one nice thing about all these corona situation we have at the moment, it's that we can make use of it in order to have these online discussions with people that would be more complicated to get here for a real discussion, although we would be willing to do that, of course, and we will in the future once it's possible again. But for now, it's nice to have you from Poland and Hungary. And I don't know from where people are following us. Mostly from Germany, I suppose, but maybe also from other places. So for how we're going to do this, we are aiming to discuss for about an hour and a half at most, certainly not longer. But we would like to, we'll start with a discussion between the three of us here on the panel, so to speak. But of course, we'd like to include you as our viewers and listeners and include you in the discussion. And this is possible essentially in two different ways. For those of you who are here on Big Blue Button with us, you will at around the middle, around midway through our time, we will open the chat function, and you will be able to put your questions into the public chat of Big Blue Button then. And for the others, for those following us on other platforms, so we're streaming this on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, you will also be able to post your questions in the chat or comment functions. And there are several colleagues of mine in the background managing this whole affair technically, and one of them, Juliane Mattei, will join us later and will introduce the questions from the chats. And she'll do that also for the questions posted here in Big Blue Button. But for those who are here with us on this platform, we would like to ask you at that point, if you like, you could then switch on your camera, the one whose question is being asked. And so we see with who we're talking. It's nicer and more direct, and you have the possibility also to ask back if maybe not everything's answered or you have a comment on the answer. So we'd like to really make this a real discussion as much as we can. So with that, yes, I'd like to finally tell you what it's all about, although you know, hopefully, a little bit. So we're here with Gabor Poljak from Hungary, from Mertek Monitor, a well-known think tank about media and media law issues. So great to have you here. And from Poland, we have Karolina Zbigniewska. And I'll continue to use your first names now, so I don't have to grapple with Polish last names. Sorry, I don't speak Polish.
Karolina Zbigniewska.
Yes, thank you. The editor-in-chief of Euractiv Poland. And great to have you here too. So yeah, we really have two great experts and plenty of things to discuss, because what we want to look at is first of all, of course, the media freedom situation in Poland and Hungary, but from a certain angle. This online discussion is part of a series we've started recently, a small series of events. There will be one more on Slovenia and Slovakia. And we're trying to look at what the EU, the European Union, can do to improve the situation in countries where press freedom is under fire, and what the EU can do more effectively. Because our observation is that, well, the EU has been criticizing many developments in Hungary for the past 10 years, in Poland for the past 5 years, especially. Well, I mean, there may have been issues before that, but since then the situation has really deteriorated. But this criticism doesn't have much effect, and we don't really see much impact. So we'd like to explore what can be done about that. But before we do so, I'd like to really start with the situation in your countries. And maybe we can start, Karolina, with Poland. So the most recent major piece of news regarding media freedom, I would say, coming from Poland, was the acquisition of or the sale of Polska Press, which is a publishing house comprising 20 of the 24 regional newspapers, as far as I know, and more than 100 local weekly newspapers and many online news outlets. So what does that mean for media freedom in Poland?
The answer can be short and optimistic, but I will make it a little longer, because short and optimistic would be, we'll see. But longer and not so optimistic is that we have already seen what can happen with the media in Poland when it is being taken over by the current party in power. Although now the takeover is indirect, because it's not by the government, it's not the public media, it's the private media that has been taken over by the biggest Polish company, the state-owned refinery firm PKN Orlen. And actually it hasn't been yet finalized. It is now being accepted by our competition chamber, UOKiK, and it should be finalized by the end of January. But we have seen the takeover of the Polish broadcaster, so the Polish TV, the Polish radio, which has turned step by step these media, these radio stations, these TV channels into outright mouthpieces of our government. There are it's not my personal opinion. It's explained by the data showing that, for example, the major evening news program Wiadomości TVP, the second most watched news program in Poland, during the last year's presidential campaign, has been talking predominantly about the current president that has won this second elections for him. And mostly in around 97% of cases, it has been talking about him positively. As regards his major opponent, the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, it has been talking about him much less, like 1/3 of the number of mentions of the president. But also in general, it was talking about him negatively or not at all, as mentioned. So the media taken over directly as public media has turned into propaganda tools, in a way, of the ruling party. And it can happen also to Polska Press, the one that you mentioned. But as I said in the beginning, in short, we will see, because its president, Daniel Obajtek, indeed, he's close to the governing party, and the company is the public company. But still, he promises that the takeover will not translate into making this media dependent. He says that this media is reaching over 17 million readers that are potential consumers of PKN Orlen fuel, but also other goods that they are providing. He says that it's just about increasing his customer base. But on the other hand, what The Economist Weekly mentioned in their article, that was actually the first one that mentioned the takeover to the world, is that this 17.6 million readers are mostly readers from smaller towns, from the countryside. So it's the conservative base of the electorate of our ruling party, Law and Justice, because it's exactly from there where from the most of its voters come from. So it's like potentially to be used to cement their voters base. And we know from other countries. Recently I wrote a big analysis of Central and Eastern European countries' media situations, including Visegrad countries. I, of course, spoke also to Gabor Poliak to consult him on Hungarian political and media scene. But I also wrote about Russia, about Belarus, about Ukraine. And what they hold in common is that when big companies related to the state, officially or unofficially, take over the media, it's often that during normal times they don't, so the politics don't influence the content. But when it comes to the elections, it does. So that's the scare. The other scare is connected to money, because already now, during the last 5 years, with Law and Justice in power, Law and Justice also managed the public advertisement and public announcements to be sold rather in majority to media outlets that are not critical of the government. So it almost excluded, for example, critical Gazeta Wyborcza, the major quality media in Poland, from receiving money and from publishing public announcements. So also people, readers of Gazeta Wyborcza, didn't have access to information, for example, concerning how to deal with COVID, because it's not only, as I said, about advertisements, it's also about announcements. So it's a part of more general voters base access policy. Now, with taking over of Polska Press, this phenomenon can be cemented in that really the majority of advertisements and announcements can just go to this local and regional media, which is also not very good for the open competition on the local media market, because other outlets that are not within the Polska Press Group will be excluded from support. And we know that the press, especially print press, has for years now been dealing with reduced interest in sales, which so more and more titles have been closed, and now this phenomenon has been speeding up due to the COVID pandemic. Okay. People were transferring more and more online, and now this process may be strengthened. It's actually the fear that was mentioned to me today by one of the publishers of the local media, that it's a real fear, the lack of competition.
Yeah. So we may come back to some of these questions later, but I just want to jump in because you've already touched many points. One point I would like to raise in this context is what struck me about this Polska Press sale, or the intention to sell to Orlen, is that this would, of course, be the first major step towards repolonization of the media, which has been a project announced by the PiS government ever since they arrived 5 years ago, and then after last year's presidential election, they took up the talk again, and for a long time I would have thought, okay, this will be difficult in legal terms, in competition terms, but now they've done it without forcing someone to sell by legal means, but just having the sale. So will this be a model for other, or may this be, I mean, from the point of view of the government, may this be a model for other media outlets in non-Polish ownership?
Straight after the presidential elections that I mentioned last year, Jarosław Kaczyński, so the leader of Law and Justice governing party, said media in Poland should be Polish. So in light with that statement, he also confirmed that the works on the new repolonization, deconcentration of the media law are underway. But it's instead of making this law alive, they turned words into deeds by doing this takeover that we discussed, Orlen buying the Polska Press. So it was about repolonization, but it's also, as I mentioned, about deconcentration. It depends what suits the party. So now, according to Onet, by the way, is owned by Axel Springer, so German-Swiss. So we cannot be sure if it's true. Just kidding. But Onet got the information that the ruling Law and Justice Party is also planning to take over a Polish newspaper, the second biggest quality media outlet, Media Daily in Poland, Rzeczpospolita. It's owned by Gremi Media, and it's a Polish media owned by Polish shareholders. Its owner of Gremi Media is Mr. Hajdarowicz, a Pole. So still, it's not within the repolonization. It's more about not so much also about deconcentration. It's rather about taking over the new titles that are influential on the Polish media scene. So it will certainly continue. Some of the media might be taken over or tried to be taken over under the guise of repolonization, but some others, they will be just taken over.
Now, looking at Hungary, Gabor, I think last week I read an analysis by an online investigative online outlet, Válasz Online, saying that they looked at the media landscape and said that 44 of the 88, so half of the news outlets of national importance, are under government of Fidesz control, the government party. So now, taking an optimistic view, that would mean half of the media outlets of national importance are still independent, opposition. What are they? Or that's probably a much too optimistic outlook. So what does that tell us?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, it is much too, it's too optimistic, because it is not only about the figures. It is also about the opportunities of surviving. And if we are speaking about the financial space, if we are speaking about the opportunity to gain information about public issues, then this other half, this independent half of the media outlets are in a very strong condition. They have to struggle from day to day to survive, because we don't have, I have to say that we don't have a real media market anymore. We don't have a normal advertisement market. And yeah, so it is not just about the numbers of the media outlets, what is owned by the government affiliated companies. And secondly, these are really Fidesz or government affiliated companies. The connection between these media outlets and the Fidesz party, or with President Orban, is very, very clear and strong. These are owned by the friends of Orban. These are owned by the business partners of Orban. So it is not a far connection, some political influence on these media outlets. these are really politically controlled media outlets. Yeah, and this is the main problem of Hungary, and it is every time interesting to hear about the Polish situation. I have to say that Mr. Kaczynski is the best student of Mr. Orban. We don't say re-Hungarization, maybe because it is too difficult to say that. But Orban also stated in 2010 that there are four sectors in the economics that should be in the hand of Hungarian owners. One of these four sectors was and is the media. The others are energetics, banking sector, and I don't know the word, the shops for people. And from three of these four sectors are really now in hand of the majority of the sectors are in hand of Hungarian businessmen, and this is also valid for the media companies. And I have to say that Orban had bigger luck than Mr. Kaczynski, because we had the change in 2010, and that was 2 years after the big financial crisis worldwide. And that meant that all investors had big problems, or media investors had big problems on our markets, not only in Hungary, but also in Czech, Slovakia, and Poland. And that was the time when they decided to leave most of the markets. Hungarian media markets and the media markets of the V4 countries were dominated by Western European and American investors before 2010. Now we have a media market only with two Western European investors. All others left the Hungarian market. And that was one of the big lack of Orban. So the investors wanted to leave. Orban wanted to have the media outlets, and that was the good point to meet the interest. This is one of the starting points. Secondly, Orban has a 2/3 majority, and this is the third time that he gained this 2/3 majority on the election. And Mr. Kaczynski didn't have it, and don't have it. And it meant from 2010 that the whole legal system, from the constitution to the last law, can be changed without any consultation, not only with the oppositional parties, but without the civil society, without the professions, the experts. So everything is a political decision, and a one-sided political decision. Orban can decide alone everything what he wants to decide. So now, of course, not now, but since 2010, we have media laws that made possible to have a media authority, a media council, only with nominated by Fidesz. We have also a state media, not a public media anymore. State media that is absolutely intransparent. It is dominated by guys who are 100% or more loyal to Orban, and so the whole legal and organizational background is in the hand of the Fidesz, and it made also possible to gain the whole media market by buying or establishing new media outlets. And the third pillar of this media policy is the domination of the content. It is not only the situation that ruling politicians don't answer any question of independent journalists, but also the leaders of schools, the leaders of hospitals are not willing, or they are not allowed to speak with independent journalists. You can imagine what a situation does it mean in this pandemic situation. It is not possible to have information other than the information what is spread by the government. So everything is from the begin to the last word is under control of the ruling party.
Looking at media that have come under government control or have been whose independence has been taken. An interesting example maybe to look at a bit closer is Index, which made headlines last year and which used to be the biggest, most read news outlet and online news outlet in Hungary. And then when it became clear that their new owners would not respect their editorial independence anymore, virtually all of the staff left after the editor-in-chief, and then so what has become of Index now? What is its function nowadays?
Yeah, there is two, how to say, level of functioning. In the background, the owner is one of the most important media guys of the Fidesz. Where he is present, there the interests of the Fidesz are in safety, I have to say, and that means that also the financing is going through the Fidesz economic interests. So they are expected two days owners, and from one day to other, everything can be changed, and it happens. One of the editors, the chief editor-in-chief, was also changed in the last months. So all decisions are in the hand of Fidesz guys. The second level is the content itself. I have to say that Index is not the worst pro-government media outlet. You can read it and you can find there true information, and not only information from the government. But it is a strategical question, because Fidesz owns also the second biggest news portal. It was, if we will speak about the role of Western European investors, it was owned by Deutsche Telekom, and Deutsche Telekom sold it to the family of the president of the Hungarian State Bank, and it was knowingly so. So it was not a big secret. The decision makers of Deutsche Telekom knew that this very important media outlet goes to the Fidesz. So the second biggest portal is also in the hand of Fidesz, and at this portal you can only read the propaganda issues from the government and from the party. So they don't need another propaganda portal. They need a portal when they can also reach people who are not so enthusiastic for the propaganda. It is very important to gain all media outlets that have a huge reach to the audience. And Index was one of the last such media outlet with a bigger reach. I have to say that the last one, the last media outlet with a really huge reach is RTL, again owned by the German RTL group. And yeah, it is every time it sounds crazy when I say that RTL is one of the last bastion of the freedom of information and freedom of speech in Hungary, but it is true because they have not bad information program, news program every day. There they spread 10 or 15 minutes political information, and these are not the messages of the government. These information are reliable. They are independent from the government. And yeah, RTL is the last one that reach a lot of people. Index was therefore very important. It was also able to reach people who are not so enthusiastic for politics, but they read something, and Index was this something what they read.
Now, speaking of RTL, what's the current situation of Club Radio? This is one of the RTL stations, or I don't know which other ones are there, but Club Radio is the most well-known because in the early Orban years, they already had a big fight about their broadcasting license. I think before that they had a national license, then they ended up with one only for Budapest, and now they're about to lose that or have to. Well, it's still open. At least it was put up for bidding. It's the situation for them.
Yeah, this is one of the not so much points where I can be a bit optimistic. The last developments regarding the frequency of club radio are quite good. Club Radio, one sentence about it. It is an independent, a very small company, and it is a very critical radio with the government. This is I don't like to say that we have pro and anti-government media outlets, because pro-government media is something what we really have. They spread propaganda, but the others are not for the opposition parties. The others, the independents, are real journalists, and they do what journalists have to do. They are also critical against the oppositional party. But club radio maybe is the most critical against the government, and it is a local radio in Budapest, but you can also, of course, have it on internet. I don't live in Budapest, but I also hear club radio every day, because this is one of the last independent voice. And so the importance of this radio is huge, but the company itself is very small. They had a license to 2020, and they theoretically had the opportunity to extend the frequency license for 5 other years. But the Media Council, as I said, only with nominees of the Fidesz, decided that they cannot extend. They have to apply again for the frequency. So it was not forbid or to continue the broadcasting, but they have to apply for the frequency again. The newest development in this situation, that there was 3 players in the tender, but 2. So Club Radio is the last one who is still within the frequency tender, because the applications of the other players were not in line with the formal criteria of the Media Council. It should mean that Club Radio can continue the broadcasting the next years too.
Okay. Now we've taken a first look. Well, of course, there would be other issues to explore, but we've taken a first overview, I'd say, of the situation in Poland and Hungary. Now, to connect this to our basic question about what can the EU do, what can we as European neighbors and partners do to support civil societies, to support independent media? Now I mentioned this discussion is part of a little series of events, and in our first discussion we mainly looked took a more overview position and looked at what can be done from the EU's perspective. And actually my takeaway was that there are not so many ideas. There are high hopes on this newly established or newly, well, it hasn't been fully approved, I think, yet, but this newly found negotiated rule of law mechanism by the EU, which is supposed to enable the European Union to put financial pressure on countries that, member countries that keep violating basic the basic tenets and the basic values of the European Union. Now, this was watered down a bit in a compromise with Poland and Hungary, which resisted heavily at first. So the question now is a bit, what do you think this will change anything? Will this have any real impact? Maybe Karolina first. Will this have any impact on how the Polish government is likely to proceed regarding media freedom? Will it be able, this mechanism be able to put a brake to any further deterioration?
Thank you for the question. As you said, it has been watered down. I see good points and bad points of the rule of law mechanism because it is being, from its start, being used by the governments of Poland and of Hungary, used as the tool in the internal politics of permanent scapegoating of Brussels that is infringing on our sovereignty. So it's being a very comfortable tool that is being used to acquire more cemented voters base again. The positive thing, it's about having a good start. I would totally change the structure of giving out funds, structural funds. Now they are being part of them are being managed by self-governments, by local governments. It's so in Poland, and they are not only owned by, government, by the politicians that are friendly to the government, but it's not only about this. It's about that the voters base of right-wing populist politicians, as we see it happening not only in Poland, not only in Central Eastern Europe, but all around the world, also in the United States. These are there are two voters bases. There are more open, more environmentally friendly liberal Democrats that mostly live in bigger cities. They're mostly a little bit more educated. They have free professions. They're a little bit more open-minded. And it's around 40%, 30% of the society versus the other 40% of the society that people that are living most of all in a little bit smaller towns with on average a little bit lower education level, a little bit lower monthly salary. So these are two bases that are being a little bit separate. That's why I would think of changing the structure of European funds to be given with both these voters' base in mind, because really we now have a little bit two Europes, two public spaces, two worlds in a way. And why should we just cater to needs of just one of them? Because just one will win, because it's so about governments. It's just one political option that wins at a certain moment. That's why I would go for that, for making a hybrid of funds being given out according to these two models. One managed by the central government, and one given out to mayors. I'm really friendly with late Benjamin Barber's idea about the mayors, that would rule the world. I would like this dream of his to at least partly to come true. He wrote his book in 2013. Its second part of the title was Dysfunctional Nations, Rising Cities. Now our nations are even more dysfunctional than in 2013, and we know it here. So we must remember that mayors are also democratically chosen leaders. That's why they also cater to the needs of some parts of our electorates. So this is one part of my recommendation, this hybrid system of giving out funds and money. But the second one is about the funds for the media, because there are so many projects by European Union, each of its institutions, each of its agencies, but also given out by many other local and international organizations. Usually these funds are being given out and they are project oriented. So an institution, donor institution, thinks about a project, about theme, and it wants the media, independent media, at least from the name, to cater to that plan, to that project. I think that it shouldn't be so, that independent media, of course, for keeping their resilience and independence, they need support, a lot of support, but it shouldn't be the support that is being given under conditions. The only condition really should be the independence of the media, and the rest shouldn't be assessed by the administrative clerks. So these are two recommendations that are actually, in my opinion, fundamental.
So just to understand these recommendations better, are these things are these connected to this rule of law mechanism, or are these things that could just be done within within EU programs, within EU funding? And yeah, do you think this new instrument will be of any help?
As I said, it has its positives and negatives, and it's a good start. But I think that although it should be continued, and I am really a fan of this new annual rule of law report that considers all the EU member states and not only the two of us with the Hungarians. I really appreciate that. But it's still really difficult and abstract in a way to say what are the exact criteria for the rule of law. For example, now the German bilateral consultations of vaccines beyond the contract that was being actually led by Germany as a head of presidency last half of the year was also in a way a breach of a kind of, if not rule of law, then some kinds of values and norms, the value of solidarity. So the thing is, the difficulty with specifying the limits, the borders, and the definitions of when some kind of behavior is within the rule of law value. So that's my problem. So I think, as I said in the beginning as well, it's a good start, but it's a lot of mental work still to be done be ahead of us to make that really valid and not being just used against European Union by populist governments.
Yeah, and it's good you mentioned these rule of law reports, which I think is also an interesting instrument. So these are going to be put out annually and looking at the situation in each member country. So and yeah, the first for the first report, there was also some criticism of Germany of the political influence on attorneys, on state attorneys here, general attorneys. So I found that an interesting point, an important experience, I think, for everybody. That now there's also criticism of others, not only the usual suspects. Now, Gabo, what's your take of this rule of law mechanism? Because I think it's really an important, or of other EU possibilities to influence the situation in the member states to try to improve the media freedom situation.
Yeah, for me, it is really disappointing. I am absolutely pessimistic in this field. But before that, let me say something to what Katarina said about Poland and the polarization of Polish people. I have to say every time that the situation of Hungary and Poland is really not the same. Also from not only because Poland is 4 times bigger, the market of 4 times bigger than Hungary, but also because in Poland there is a real polarization based on values. There is a strong Catholical tradition, and you can really find this fragmentation between countryside and cities. In Hungary, the value system of a Fidesz voter and the value system of the voters of the Socialist Party or the socialist parties are very, very similar. So our polarization is not a natural one. It is an artificial one operated and run by Fidesz. And the role of the media, role of the propaganda is much more important in making this polarization than the polarization in Poland. So it's again a big difference between the two countries. Yeah, I say every time, and of course this is not something that a lawyer usually says, but I have to say that Orbán is someone without any ideological background. He is the ideal populist without any idea about the world. He is only for the power. And if the power needs more propaganda or the power needs more, I don't know, social kind state step, then he will do that. So just to clarify that we are not speaking about two very similar situations. Yeah, why is disappointing this rule of law mechanism or conditionality? It is in the end it was not a rule of law mechanism. It is also only named as a conditionality for the budget. I checked again. You cannot find the word press, media, opinion. You can find the word, of course, rule of law, but also the definition of the rule of law is not the same definition that you can find in the EU contract, the EU funding contract. It is focusing only on the budgetary questions and mostly on the questions of the legal system and the judicial system. But you cannot find the word of media, publicity, press, and so on. My friends, my colleagues say every time that why am I so angry against the EU? It is not the task of the EU to solve the problem of Hungary. I agree, of course, but you have to say that the EU is the part of the problem, because Hungary is a small country without huge assets. Everything what Orbán can do to build up oligarchs, to buy media outlets, to buy other companies in the energetic sector, Orbán needs the money of the European Union, and the European Union financed this change in Hungary. And from 2010, or at least from 2011, it was clear for everyone at the level of European Union and in Germany that it is not the way of democracy. It is not the way of the rule of law. However, they funded it further. They funded it continuously, and they made it possible to have this autocratic rule in Hungary now. And secondly, yeah, there are political discussions. We had reports on the media freedom, on the state of democracy, on the rule of law. I don't know, thousands of reports from the European Union. Thank you. I know everything. I don't need one more report, an annual report, if there is no consequence. And in this year, there was no consequence of the rule of law report. So this whole rule of law debate remains a political debate. Even if now we have this directive, I'm absolutely sure that in the next 100 years, there will be no big issue based on this new conditionality directive. Therefore, what I believe is the law of the European Union concerning the economical questions. As I said, the natures of the problems of the media situation not only in Hungary, but in the whole region, are economic. They have an economic nature. And this is the field where the European Union has the power. I cannot understand why the European Union does not use this power. We, with my NGO that you mentioned, made 2 complaints against the financing of the public media in Hungary, and secondly, another one against the giving of state advertisement for media companies. And these complaints are based on the simple legal framework of the European Union, competition law questions, because we can take the problems through the competition law, even if the end point of this situation and this whole procedure is not only to have the better competition, but to have the better media freedom. But if you can go through the competition law to the end, to the media freedom, then you have to use it. And our complaint against the financing of the public media was submitted in 2016. Last year, I don't know how many times, but we had again the consultation with the Commission. They don't understand the situation still after 5 years. They don't understand how the Hungarian public media works. They don't care about the whole things. But I have to say that all Western European countries were checked based on these expectations regarding the state aid. So the German public television, the Austrian public television, the all Scandinavian public televisions were controlled, and all these countries had to change the law about the public media financing. Why cannot use this power, the Commission, against Hungary? It's not a big thing. And the other, the other complaint is about the other biggest problem of the Hungarian media situation, because, as I said, there is no market, no media market anymore in Hungary. The Fidesz media can only be operated because it is financed by public money. It is not a market. All of the Fidesz affiliated media is funded by public money, not only by European but also by Hungarian tax money. But it is funded by public money, and it would be so simple to say that you cannot do that. You give money for media outlets that are friendly with you, and you don't give any money to media outlets that are unfriendly with you. And it is evidence-based. We have the figures to that. It is simple. And if the Fidesz-affiliated media outlets don't get the public funding, then they cannot survive. They have to struggle also for the market resources, and it would help a lot for the Hungarian situation. So I cannot understand what the European Union does and why it does this.
Sorry, I forgot to ask before to mention before I asked you your question. I think it's now finally time to open the chat and to open for questions from the audience. So maybe just briefly, I don't know if there are any questions yet, Juliana. If yes, you're welcome to introduce them.
Yes.
No, I'll continue to ask. Okay.
Yes, there are. Good evening. Actually, there have been 2 questions on our Facebook account. So they're both economy related, and they both address both countries more or less. So the user Martina Gemma, she asked via Facebook, referring to a report from a Hungarian investigative journalism center, Direct 36. And there was a report about Orban having good relations, for example, to managers of the German car industry and other German corporations as well. She says that because of that support from, for example, the German economy, Orban still feels safe in his position. And she's asking Gabor and Carolina what they think could be done against that. In Germany, for example, the managers of the car industry have never been addressed or confronted with their support for Orban, she says. And how could we achieve to confront them, we as citizens, I guess? And how do we get our politicians to criticize Orban, for example, the Trump before Trump, as she calls him, in the same way they now really clearly criticize Donald Trump?
So who wants to start? Maybe Gabor. Hungary was mentioned more directly, and maybe I could add to this the first question. I've also read media research regarding also advertisements by foreign companies, big companies, from Germany, for example, which also went mainly, or apparently is also going mainly to pro-government media. Is that true? And what do you make out of that?
Yeah, I also wanted to tell you that this week there was we have in Hungary one important prize for journalists, for investigative journalists, and this prize was awarded this year. Based on the journalistic articles from last year, for this article that described how Orban cooperates with the German managers, the German economic interests. I think, this is something this is again something what is very, very disappointing to see. I am really a big fan of Germany. I live there. I like the way how Germany works, but what the German companies, also the media companies, but also the car industry companies in Hungary do, is not the same what they do at home in Germany. And also the German politics seems to be a defender of the German economic interests and not of the European democracy, in case of Hungary at least. It's very, very sad to see. The only case when Frau Merkel said anything about the Hungarian media situation was the case when RTL was taxed by the government with a very specific tax, what was really targeted against RTL. At that time, Frau Merkel came to Hungary, and that was one of the points of the negotiation between Merkel and Orban. But you cannot mention any other points when she said anything about the Hungarian media situation. Yeah, the situation for Audi, Mercedes, BMW, it is perfect for in Hungary. They got a huge amount as a state aid for giving work for Hungarian people. It is okay. It could work, but so you cannot imagine, and I cannot imagine that any other government wouldn't be so friendly with the German companies. It cannot be a political goal to have a good relationship between Germany and Orban because of the German companies, because all Hungarian governments should be friendly with the German companies because they are the biggest players in the Hungarian economics. So as I said, Deutsche Telekom, but also the other German companies left the Hungarian media market knowing that the new owners has a very, very strong connection to the oligarchs, to the politics. What could you do? It is interesting because I know that it is also reported in Germany. You can read about it in the biggest papers in Germany. Okay, not every day, but Hungary is not important. Hungary is a very small country. Poland is another situation. It's a much bigger country. But but if so, it won't be one of the important questions of the next election this year in Germany, how to handle the Hungarian democracy. I cannot imagine that. So if there is no, how to say, moral requirement within the German politicians, I don't believe that the German voters can do anything against this.
Paulina, does this problem also exist in Poland, that foreign companies also have play a partisan role, meaning they put their money only in one camp?
They usually put a little bit more money in the camp than in the ruling camp. They're a little bit value agnostic. So who wins this party is being these big companies, not only German, generally the big companies tend to try to be as close as possible to the lawmakers. Probably it's not a phenomenon specific to Poland and Hungary. As far as I know, not at all, which doesn't make it any better. But for example, one of 4 biggest tech companies that I will not mention the name of now is organizing every time the biggest, most fancy electoral night and after each elections. And our prime minister and our top politicians all go there straight away from their own party election nights. I don't find it okay to see the prime minister at such an event sponsored and made and organized by one of the biggest tech companies in the world. And as I said, it's straight after their own electoral night. I think it's that it's very wrong, but I just wanted to give an example that it's a phenomenon that is sadly happening all around the place.
What are you saying about putting a little bit more money into the government's or the pro-government camp? Sounds a bit like donations to political parties in Germany, which are also, yeah.
I don't know exactly about the money flows. I just know about being close. I know exact actions by other big companies that offer really big money to different so-called PR companies to make them meet MPs of the ruling parties. They make trips for them. They want to be close. It's what happened, and it's what I see, and it's what I know about. And I can only know how it's in other countries from you.
Do we have any more questions from the audience at the moment?
Yes, there's one more question over Facebook from Dorota Nigren. She proposes that there should be a campaign launched targeting private companies again to support democracy and independent journalism projects. When it is the case that independent media are sold by corporations, for example, as we just witnessed in Poland, for example, from German corporations, and end up in the hands of government propagandists, as she puts it. So she's more or less asking for campaigns to support independent journalism in Poland, for example, with corporate money.
Yes, of course, I totally agree. It's a great idea. I would like to have also, not only me, it's a general postulate, but by many independent media professionals in Poland, not only to make changes in the Business Act in Poland, but also in the constitution that would make it impossible for the public institutions and public companies to take over and own the media. It should be being illegal, but the business part, as is being mentioned in this postulate that you are mentioning, is another story, and I am for that, and the similar requirement should be binding also for the public institutions. But now it was a part of wishful thinking, as we know, for example, with Germany, that is now introducing the requirement for the biggest companies on your market to have at least one woman in the management boards, yes, because now it's 10 to 13, as we know, at the same percent. As we know, the postulate of having gender equality in the management boards has been very long one, and certainly Germany is trying to be one of the ones that is bringing examples to other countries. Yet still, it's very difficult because it's also tough for the competition with our other companies. So I want that to happen, what is being mentioned in the question. But sadly, I also know that it will take some time to have that implemented.
By the way, there's one person here with us. If I don't know if it's on purpose that you have your camera on. If not, maybe you may want to switch it off again. Are there any more questions at the moment? Otherwise, I would have some more also. Thank you.
Yeah, there are two more questions from the audience here inside Big Blue Button. There's one from Nina Gräbner, and she's asking if there's any possibility to support the free media in Poland and Hungary from Germany, maybe via online subscriptions. I don't know if she's referring to German language media or for people in Germany who speak Polish or Hungarian. Maybe she can further elaborate on the question, because I think she's here. Frau Gräbner, if you could unmute yourself and activate your camera, then we can see and hear you.
It's an interesting idea, certainly. I mean, we've advertised, for example, in the past for Turkish media, also independent Turkish media, to, I mean, even if you don't read Turkish or Polish, I mean, it's still a way of showing very practical solidarity to subscribe to the media outlets you want to support. And I know, for example, or if I'm not wrong, that Gazeta Wyborcza in Poland is very successful in online subscriptions and has a very strong subscription base there, as far as I know. Do you have any comments?
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. As far as I know, it has exceeded 200,000 subscribers. So it's huge. At the same time, as I already mentioned, but it's a global trend. The sales of print has reduced for Gazeta Wyborcza into less than 100,000, and before a year ago it was around 20-30% more. But it's the same with most of dailies in Poland, that these sales of print are going down while the online subscriptions are going up. But really here Gazeta Wyborcza is setting an example. As for the question of Nina Gräbner that you mentioned about the support for the free media from Germany, in a way we had that situation with with Polska Press that was being owned by the German company that, but it was sold to the mentioned already PKN Orlen, the biggest Polish public-owned company. It was a kind of support because at least it was independent or at least values agnostic. Now we'll see. But on the other hand, I have sometimes a feeling that be it not for America and Germany, Polish civil society would be faring much worse. Each of the parties in Bundestag, and maybe not only them, have their offices in several countries around the world, and they are trying to support their thinking ideological line in a way. So we have Konrad Adenauer Stiftung since the turn from communism in 1989. We have Heinrich Böll Stiftung, we have Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and we have the Foundation of Cooperation between Poland and Germany, and so on and so on. So, and via these foundations, Germany, in a way, so German taxpayers are supporting initiatives, media initiatives, NGOs, and also maybe, I don't know about this, but probably also general companies. But in short, it's a support of democracy. These funds are not huge, but they are making many organizations do something. Because they have finances for that. So Germany is also already present. But again, referring to my point about my recommendations, that they shouldn't be project-based, but they should be just focusing on general support of free journalism. I would be really grateful if there will be really money that don't require from journalists to write about specific topics, specific organizations, and so on. Because then, even if the organization is good, it depends who is evaluating. Benevolent, like European Commission, like nice German democracy supporting foundations, it's also making media clients to their plans, ideological plans, any plans. It's really, in my opinion, very important to support the media for them being active and for them being independent.
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the few positive developments from the last 10 years is the improving of the culture of the nation in Hungary. And it means not only that the willingness of the audience is increased to donate for media outlets, but it also means that the media outlets are ready to campaigns for donation. And as far as I know, there are some media outlets, Direct 36 is one of them. They also tried to run campaigns abroad, because in several countries there are living several Hungarian people, and the most important articles of Direct 36 or other independent team Átlátszó, but also the others publish also in English. It is available not only for Hungarian readers, but also for foreign readers. And this idea to collect donations from abroad was mentioned by the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Budapest, the leader of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Budapest. And after that, we had some discussion with media outlets to organize this kind of collecting donations. But I have to say that this is one of the problems also of the independent media in Hungary. They are not really ready to cooperate with each other. because they have to live from very small resources, and that means that they don't want to share these resources with the others. So they also see each other as competitor and not as cooperator. And it is also a problem in this field. So alone they cannot reach a lot of people abroad, but I think it would be a good way to collect donations from abroad in a cooperation of independent media outlets. So yes, I think all kind of financial donations, financial support is a big help for the independent media in Hungary. And you can read the most important articles also in English, even if not in German. If I may, one more thing to that. So Friedrich Ebert Stiftung is one of the important partners of my NGO. They are ready to cooperate with us. Yeah, the Budapester Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a big fan of Orban. So they are not ready to cooperate with us. But I have to say that the other German Stiftungs, the foundations like Bosch and the others, are not present in Hungary. They don't have any project or any call for Hungarian media outlets or for Hungarian NGOs. They want to come to Hungary to have conferences or at least teaching or workshop activities. I have to say that we don't need it. Thank you. So you could be a bigger supporter of Hungary with your money, simply say. So we need also the help of the big the big German Stiftungs. And there is another question. Maybe this is my last sentence in this discussion from Yvonne Esterházy. If the support of the EBRD were used also for building up democracy, and I think all supporter, all big donator organizations have the same problem, like the European Union. They give us the money without effective control. And this is not only a problem in Eastern Europe. This is also a problem in Africa, in Asia, because it is not enough to give the money, because this money can be also used for destroying the results what was achieved in the way of the democracy. So if you give money, then please think it over how to use it. Way of using of the money. It is not enough to give the money. We couldn't build up a strong civil society. We couldn't build up a strong independent media environment, even if before the joining of the European Union, there was a huge amount of supports from abroad. When you are member of the European Union, all donors on the world think that your situation is okay because you are a member of the European Union. You are a stable democracy, well-financed, and your NGOs, your media outlets don't need our support. It is not true. It is a disadvantage of being a member of European Union.
Do we have more questions from the audience? Jana? So I would suggest maybe we could make a last round of questions.
Du warst gemutet, Juliane.
Thank you.
Okay, there's one question from Harald Schumann, who is also with us here in the room. He asks if you share the assessment of MEPs who say that the rule of law mechanism is actually already enforced since January 1st, and that the parliaments and the public should force the Commission to apply it right now and just and not wait until the European Court of Justice has ruled about it.
No, okay. I would be a bit surprised.
Well, I think that. Sorry.
No, go.
So I don't share this assessment. It's again the wishful thinking. It would be possible in the ideal society, but still our governments had met, our meaning Budapest and Warsaw had made a kind of a deal with the German presidency as representing the EU Council in the last 6 months, half of the last year, that we will agree to the rule of law mechanism, but we will also go with it to the Court of Justice of the European Union, and that most possibly it will start being really in place in 2022. It's a kind of a deal, so it's really not much to be done about it.
I formally agree with the interpretation of Herr Schumann. Practically, I cannot imagine that it will happen. It was a political deal, and no one wants to do anything against this political deal now. So, as I said, I'm afraid that this whole procedure won't be a big issue for these both countries.
Are we maybe also, I mean, this was also a takeaway from our first discussion, that one of the participants, one of the panelists, if I got his message right, was questioning a bit our big expectations at the EU or some government to put things right. I mean, maybe it's just there's not that magic instrument that will solve things. Maybe we have to look for other ways. What do you think about that? Does he have a point there, or I mean, maybe we should look at other ways also to improve the media situation. I mean, the change eventually has to come probably from the countries mostly themselves. But what ways are there to support?
As I said, for me, are the most effective tools the normal legal tools of the European Union that can be used also for our specific situation, even if an indirect way, but they can improve also the media freedom, not only the economic freedom. So it would be very important to use these tools. And I have to say that without any political will, you cannot do anything with the new legal frames. We have the Article 7 procedure. Everybody knows that it cannot be finished. There are 2 countries under the procedure. There is no way out from this situation. Poland will defend Hungary, Hungary will defend Poland, and this is the end. But also without this very specific situation, the whole procedure can be take years. So maybe there will come some change in the government in Hungary or in Poland. This is the main idea behind this very slow coming forward. So the first what you need is the political will to take effective steps, and they can be legal steps. But yeah, the other situation, the European People Party is thinking about the question if Fidesz is a conservative party or not. I don't know, so for ages, and they cannot decide. Please look at Hungary. Look at what Orban says, what he does. It is nothing to do with conservatism. So they know that, but they are not ready to decide. So the failing political will is the biggest problem.
I just wanted to add, because we talked about rule of law mechanism, about this conditionality as regards what you can do. I talked more about the EU funds, but I wanted also to mention the European Values Instrument, which was created to increase funding of the EU Rights and Values Program and support civil society organizations. I strongly believe it should not be focusing only on civil society organizations, but also on the media, because they often do a similar mission of educating the society, of building the democratic resilience of societies, but at the same time they have a good outreach, and they can make the groundwork on which the civil society organizations may work afterwards. So European Values Instrument also as a potentially important tool of the European Union, how it can support the media.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Many thanks to both of you and to everybody participating. I think it's about time to wrap it up here. And Gabo, your line has also been getting a bit unstable during the last answer. But it's also about 7:30 now. So we're through our hour and a half. And yeah, many thanks. I think there were lots of interesting insights from both your countries. And one takeaway for me was that, yeah, there are these EU instruments that have been in place for a long time. They just have to be applied in some instances. Yeah, there's stuff to think about. So many thanks to you, and many thanks to everybody who's been following us and following this discussion. And please tune back in for our third discussion. I can't put a date on it yet, but we will spread the word once we can. So we'll continue the discussion, and of course also beyond this little series of panel discussions, that we'll continue to follow the situation, and we'll be in touch. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.